In my last video, I talked about the FFS principles for tax reform, building a tax system that's fair, functional and sustainable. And just as I was finishing it, it was leaked that Rachel Reeves is thinking about scrapping stamp duty land tax in her budget. And you know what? This is fundamentally a very good idea, because stamp duty on houses is pretty much the exact opposite: fair, functional and sustainable. The problem is how she's planning to do it. I'm Jamie from Accounts, and today I will show you why stamp duty sucks. The three options Reeves is considering: two are terrible, one is on the right track, and what I think we should do instead. So let's run stamp duty through the three principles. Is it fair? Well, stamp duty punishes people for moving house. Families upgrading, pensioners downsizing, they face big bills, whilst the wealthy can stay put tax-free. First-time buyers get an exemption up to $425,000, which helps, but if you're a second stepper trying to upgrade, you're hit with the full amount. And the tax creates, therefore, perverse incentives. Empty nesters stay in big houses because moving costs too much, whilst young families stay cramped because they can't afford the stamp duty to upgrade. That means houses aren't being used efficiently, and it's not fair. So, is it functional? Well, the system is mind-bogglingly complex. Different rates for different bands, extra surcharges for second homes, different rules for first-time buyers, different systems for Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. Nobody actually understands it until they're buying a house and the solicitor hits them with the bill. The 2014 reform fixed the worst cliff edges where £1 over a threshold meant paying the higher rate on the entire price, but it's still a mess of thresholds and exemptions that generally only accountants understand. And you know a tax is badly designed when people structure purchases around avoiding it rather than making economically sensible decisions. So no, it's definitely not functional. So is it sustainable? Well, here's where stamp duty really kills the economy. It gums up the housing market. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says it clearly. Stamp duty discourages mutually beneficial transactions. Translation: people who should move for jobs don't. People who should downsize don't. People who should upgrade don't. Labour mobility, people moving where jobs are, gets strangled. When people can't move for work, productivity suffers. Houses sit underoccupied, and that's wasted capital. And the housing market seizes up. Economic flexibility dies. And the revenue for the government is volatile. When the housing market slows, stamp duty receipts collapse. You can't run public services on revenues that swing wildly with house prices. The IFS Tax by Design review from back in 2011 was absolutely brutal. There is no sound case for maintaining stamp duty, and we believe it should be abolished. The Treasury Select Committee, 10 years later, agreed. Stamp duty is extraordinarily damaging to the housing market and to the economy. It is not a sustainable tax model. So, Reeves is right if she wants to scrap it. But here's where it gets interesting. The leaks over the weekend suggest that Reeves is considering multiple options to replace stamp duty entirely. But here's the problem, is that nobody actually knows what's happening. She's already got a massive fiscal gap to fill. Estimates range from 15 billion to 40 billion. And as we discussed last time, she's promised not to raise income tax, employee national insurance or VAT. So that's 75% of government revenue she can't touch. And stamp duty raises an additional 12 billion a year. So she needs to find that from somewhere else if she plans to scrap stamp duty. So let me walk you through what's being floated as replacements for stamp duty. Option 1, a mansion tax instead of stamp duty. So idea would be to scrap the stamp duty completely, but replace it with an annual 1% tax on property values above £2 million. So that affects about 150,000 homes, and that's 0.6% of UK property. And I think many people quite like the idea as an approach to, well, tax the rich. And I'm sympathetic to that cause. However, there is a fundamental problem. This raises maybe 2 billion a year, but stamp duty raises 12 billion. So you've just blown a £10 billion hole in the budget. But Then there are also questions of fairness that have already been challenged in the press, in particular regarding the sort of geographical madness that this can create. A £2 million house in London might be a 3-bed terrace. A £2 million house in County Durham could well get you a 10-bedroom manor with 20 acres of land. You're not necessarily taxing wealth very efficiently, but you are taxing location. And the numbers are stark. 85% of these properties are in London and the South East. So essentially you're replacing a national tax that everyone pays with one that's focused on the London and commuter belt. And here's the inequality kicker. London already has some of the worst house price to income ratios in the country, averaging 14 times local salaries versus 5 times in the North East. Now you're adding an annual tax that basically only hits high price areas, making them even more expensive to live in. You're literally designing a tax that hammers the areas where housing affordability is already worst. With a bit more context, it doesn't look that progressive and potentially becomes a postcode penalty that amplifies existing inequality. Finally, when it comes to sustainability, you're funding the entire system on the narrowest possible base. What happens when those 150,000 owners find a way around it? Okay, so then there's option 2, which is scrapping stamp duty but applying a capital gains tax to all main residences. Someone sells a £500,000 house bought for £200,000 and they face a £72,000 capital gains bill. Pretty tough if you've owned that house for 20 years. Now you could improve this with indexation, only taxing real gains above inflation. And we did have this until Gordon Brown scrapped it in 1998. There was then a taper relief, but then Alistair Darling binned that in 2008. But even with some form of indexation, this is a nightmare. First, the complexity is enormous. Every sale needs to calculate index costs. You have arguing about improvements versus maintenance. And you're also dealing with all sorts of partial ownership changes. Secondly, it still punishes long-term ownership. Live somewhere for 30 years, even real gains above inflation could be massive. And third, chances are it would freeze the market. If you're facing a 6-figure bill, why sell? But here's a killer problem. In Britain, people expect that selling their home should let them buy something comparable. It's a basic deal. If you sell a 3-bed semi in Manchester, you should be able to buy another 3-bed semi in Manchester. And CGT taxes could really break this. Sell your £500,000 home, get a £72,000 bill, and you can only buy a property for 430 grand. You're going backwards. Now that's not just economically damaging, it's politically impossible. It breaks the basic fairness principle that most voters hold sacred. Your family home isn't an investment to be taxed, it's where you live. Now that doesn't mean capital gains tax doesn't need reform. I hope to cover that in future videos. So, option 3, proportional property tax. Now this one's different, so we scrap stamp duty and replace it with an annual property tax. I think the concept is exactly right. The IFS, who I really like, has been calling for this since 2011, but the execution in the likely version I think needs work. The government appears to be focused on a proposal by Tim Looming, which has a lot of merits, but I think you can do it more cleanly. Looning's version, basically the immediate change would be an annual charge of 0.54% on the value of a home above £500,000. Then you'd have an additional 0.278% band on the values over £1 million. So those houses would pay 0.8%. All of this would only start to apply after you sell and buy a new property. So it wouldn't be retrospective on existing homes. The future ambition would then be to eventually replace council tax, and yes, council tax is beyond dreadful, with councils getting to sort of set the value of taxation on the value below 500,000. So those rates would be set by local government, probably with a minimum rate of about £800 a home, but then rates increase progressively based on local values. The problems? Well, firstly, those are oddly specific rates, 0.54% and 0.278%. They're reverse engineered to try and match current revenue. I would argue we should design good policy first, then figure out a simple and understandable rate. Second, the only after sale provision could create two-tier neighbourhoods. Your neighbour pays nothing, having bought their home 5 years ago, and you're paying £3,500 a year. Identical houses, different taxes, if not forever, for a very long time. Now, the clean solution, I think, does take up this idea of a simple proportional property tax. But ideally, we want to keep things as simple as we can. And the one thing I think would be reasonable in this context would be one flat rate of tax on all properties. The IFS suggests 0.6%. So example bills, £300,000 property, be £1,800 a year. 1 million would pay 6,000, 2 million would pay 12,000. Now, this would replace both council tax and stamp duty, all done one act. Now, why this passes the FFS test is one, I think it's fair, it's progressive. You pay based on property value. You pay every year you own it, not just when you move. It's functional because it's simple. One rate, no bands, no thresholds, no only after sale complexity. And it's hard to avoid. You can't hide your house. Thirdly, it's sustainable because it's a stable revenue that doesn't crash with the housing market. It hopefully encourages mobility, and people can therefore move for jobs, and that would bring in economic growth and houses would get used more efficiently. However, we also have to talk about fair transition. So what about people who just paid stamp duty? Someone who's just paid 15 grand in tax and is now going to have to start paying the replacement tax immediately. And this is where fair and functional clash. The fairest system would give everyone kind of individual treatment depending on circumstances. The most functional would ignore the past entirely. But I think there's a pragmatic middle ground. Let people offset proportional property tax against any stamp duty paid within the last 5 years. So if you bought a house 2 days ago, that basically gives you 5 years of relief. But if you bought a place 3 years ago, you've basically got 2 years of relief left. Is it perfect? No. Someone who bought a house 4 years and 11 months ago will probably be annoyed. But you've got to pick a fair time threshold. It's simple enough to actually implement, fair enough to recent buyers, and gets everyone into the same system within 5 years. There is also the question around asset-rich, income-poor people. That's where we need to allow deferral with interest until a property is sold or inherited. And that would become a charge on the estate. It's not ideal, but it's better than forcing sales, which is something that's probably politically unsustainable. So, the numbers. The current system, stamp duty raises 12 billion and council tax raises 40 billion, so that's a total of 52 billion a year. An annual property tax at 0.6% on owner-occupied residential property, which is approximately £8 trillion of value, would raise 48 billion a year. Add remaining commercial property taxes, and you're hopefully revenue neutral. So, to conclude, I want to introduce the FFS scorecard, which effectively tries to apply the 3 principles against different taxes that we might want to compare. Now, in this instance, if we look at current stamp duty, it fails across the board. Is it fair? No. Punishes people for moving. Is it functional? Nope. It's complex, a mess of bans and exemptions. And is it sustainable? No. It's a volatile revenue stream that kills labour mobility. Mansion tax replacing stamp duty? Fair. Well, better, but still it creates a postcode lottery. And is it functional? Well, no. It only raises 2 billion versus the 12 billion we need. And is it sustainable? No. It's a very narrow base of 150,000 properties, and that has major problems. So, capital gains taxes on main residences, fair? Well, no. I think for most people it will break the principle that you should just be able to buy something comparable when you sell. Is it functional? Nope. There is a nightmare of complexity, even with indexation. And is it sustainable? Well, no. It would freeze the housing market for the next 5 years. But if we take Loonig's proposal and try and improve it and come up with a simple property tax with a proper transition, well, is it fair? Yes, it's progressive based on value with transition relief. Is it functional? Yes. One rate, a simple system, easy to understand. Is it sustainable? Well, yes. Stable revenue, encourages mobility, and it grows with the economy. And based on this, as you can see, For me, there's a clear winner. Anyway, here we are. Stamp duty sucks. Everyone knows it. Even Reeves can see it. The solution is simple. Annual property tax, where we replace stamp duty and council tax, but do it quickly and cleanly. We give recent buyers a transition relief, and we phase it in properly. Yes, it's politically hard, but the question isn't whether it's politically easy, it's whether it's right. Tomorrow's budget will tell us which way Reeves goes. My bet is she's going to tinker around the edges some more and end up putting even more of the burden on younger workers. Tinkering won't fix this, only proper reform will. I'll be back later in the week with my reaction and analysis, but in the meantime, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about my suggested approach? Are there better ideas out there? Please add your comments below. This is a debate worth having, and I know there are smart perspectives beyond mine. Also, please do like, share and subscribe. I'm Jamie from Accounts. If we fix tax, we can fix Britain. Thank you.